dead. For all practical purposes, gone. Returned to the dust. Memory of them is forgotten. But Jesus knows that if he will go through the suffering, experience the cross, he will be able to resurrect, bring back to life those who've trusted in God. He must have looked forward to that with anticipation, with joy. Wow. Think of the maybe millions from the time of creation until Jesus comes that have come forth from the grave, praising God, glorifying God because of the death of Jesus. He looked forward to that. I'm sure he did. Here's something else I think he looked forward to. Isaiah 65:17. I think this was something he looked forward to with great anticipation. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered nor come to mind. Just use your imagination a moment. Imagine back at the creation of this world, the joy that Jesus experienced in creating this earth. It didn't look like anything like it looks like today. It was beautiful. Everywhere you looked, there was beauty. And then he created the animals and the birds and the fish, and then finally Adam and Eve. That must have been a joyous occasion for Jesus. And he's looking forward to doing it again. He really is. I'm sure he's looking forward with great anticipation to creating this earth all over again. I create new heavens. And the reason he has to create new heavens is because we've got a lot of space junk up there. You got to clean all that stuff up. And now they're talking about putting atomic weapons up in space, or hydrogen bombs up in space, nuclear weapons up in space. That's terrible. That's scary. So God's got to clean up heaven as well as the earth. I think Jesus looked forward with joy to being able to recreate this world in its original beauty. Guess what? We're going to get to watch him. Well, how about this one? Do you think Jesus looked forward with joy to this experience? Revelation 21, verse 3. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. Just imagine a wayward son or daughter coming home. I had a doctor and his wife and members of my church in Birmingham, Alabama, many years ago. They had a 16-year-old daughter, sort of rebellious. She went to a rock concert one night with some of her friends. And when the rock concert left town, she left with them, 16 years old. Without any warning, taking anything with her, when they left, she left with them. The doctor and his wife knew the name of that rock band, and so they tracked it carefully, knowing that she was with them all around the country, traveling around. She was a good piano player, so she played the piano, or the equalizer, or what do you call these? Synthesizer. Oh, yeah, she was playing that. Gone for years. No communication. And then one day, the telephone rang. Mom, can I go home? What do you think Mom said? Oh, yes, you can come home. Jesus is looking forward to all of his people coming home. He says, I'm going to live with them. They're going to be my people, and I'm going to be their God. All that I anticipated when I created the world is finally, after all these thousands of years, it's going to happen. Wow. We can't put ourselves in the mind of Jesus. We don't know just all that he was looking forward to, anticipating, but all that he anticipated made him feel that it was worthwhile to suffer the shame and the cross. And this is not strange to us. We know almost every human accomplishment requires some suffering, some sacrifice. When I first married my wife, way back there in 57, she had a brother 2 years older than her. I got acquainted with him. He worked for a heating and air conditioning man. He's 29 years old. He had a dream. I want to own my own heating and air conditioning business. He and his wife found the cheapest shack they could find to live in, the least expensive shack they could find. It was an old shed that had been converted into an apartment. He and his wife saved every penny they could. They sacrificed everything. They didn't eat anything that was none necessary, just basic food, no desserts, no soda pop, no pop. They were living as frugal as they possibly could, and they saved every penny they could save. And every time he got enough money, he'd go buy a piece of equipment. It took him several years, about 10 years, I think, for him to finally pinch and save and buy enough equipment that he had what he needed to start his own business. He became a wealthy man. He prospered. But it took a lot of sacrifice on he and his wife and children's part to get there. Let me tell you about somebody close to home. Many years ago, David was a nurse, registered nurse, home health nurse. Sherry was a nurse, but she had 2 children at this time, and she was a stay-at-home mom. But David had a dream. He saw something out there in front of him. He wanted to be a doctor. Now, I'm sure all of you realize it's expensive to become a doctor. Medical schools are expensive. And you still got to live. He's got a wife and 2 children. How can they possibly do it? I wasn't involved in their decisions. But David and Sherry decided to make the sacrifice. And David went to medical school. 7 years of poverty. and in some cases, abject poverty. I remember a time that Mom and I went to visit Sherry and David. I believe that, I don't remember whether Jared had been born yet or not, but anyway, Sherry had these children and no diapers. Couldn't afford diapers. I know one time in the wintertime, they rented this house that had propane heat. It's cold in North Missouri, in case you're not aware of it. It gets cold in North Missouri. They ran out of propane. And here's Sherry and two children, maybe a third of them by this time. One day she looked out the window and the propane man was putting propane in her tank. She ran out and said, "I'm sorry, I don't have any money. We can't pay you." He said, "I'm not going to let you and those children stay here in the cold house. You pay me when you get the money." I still have something that is very important to me. During those years when they were struggling, barely living so David could go to medical school, Christmas came. They had no money to give Christmas presents. But Sherry made me a little wooden toolbox made out of 1x6s or 1x8s. Little wooden toolbox. That's been, what, Sherry? 30 years ago? 35 years ago? I still have it. To me, that little wooden toolbox spelled Love. So, you've got to have a dream to accomplish something. You've got to have a goal, and you've got to be willing to sacrifice for it. Now, let's think of ourselves. My sermon title, you remember? For the joy set before us. Many of the things that Jesus looked forward to, I'm looking forward to. The Apostle Paul named something he was looking forward to that probably is number one in my life. Philippians 3, verses 10 to 11. 10 and 11. That I may know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed to his death, if by any means I may attain to the resurrection from the dead. How about you? That's what we're here for, isn't it? In anticipation of someday being resurrected from the dead. We know we're all going to die. Some of us sooner than others. Right? Some of us are going to die. But we're all going to die. And the reason we are here this morning is because we have this hope of being resurrected. Joy set before us. Like Paul said, if by any means, nothing, brothers and sisters, is more important than being in the resurrection from the dead. Think of this, 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 and 17. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord. How does that sound to you? Joy? Joy worth sacrificing for? Joy worth carrying a cross for? Joy worth dying for? For me it is. And then listen to this. This is cream on the top. John 14, 1-3. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Now, I'm assuming that Jesus is talking about the New Jerusalem. He's talking about that 1,000 years that we will spend with him in heaven. I think there's a planet up there somewhere called heaven. A real planet. And that's where God's throne is. And that's where he's building this New Jerusalem. Now, John pictures this Jerusalem so big, our minds can't comprehend it. I mean, it's a massive thing. And in that city, Jesus is building a place. Maybe it'll be a duplex. Maybe a condominium. Maybe it'll just be an apartment. I don't know. And a high rise that goes up 5 miles. I don't know. But Jesus is preparing a place for me and for you. A place prepared by a loving Savior. I have no idea what Jesus is preparing for me. But he's preparing a place for Dad. He's preparing a place for you. I look forward to that with great anticipation. Do you? That's joy set before me. A home that Jesus prepared for me. Gets better. Revelation 21, verses 3 and 4. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things are passed away. Wow. No more pain. I had a man dying with bone cancer way back years ago in North Missouri. They didn't have all the medications then that they have now. That's been 60 years ago. He was in a lot of pain. One day I was sitting in his living room talking with him, and he said, You know, Pastor, the Bible talks about streets of gold. I don't care. I'll walk on concrete or asphalt. It talks about streets of gold and houses and silver, and that doesn't mean anything to me. But he says, the Bible says there'll be no more pain. That speaks to me, he said. Joy set before us. No more suffering, no more pain, no more heartache, no more disappointment, no more anything that makes us unhappy. Well, it gets better. Luke 12, verse 32. Do not fear, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you what? The kingdom. Not just a home in the New Jerusalem. He said, I want to give you a kingdom. The kingdom of earth. Listen to this. In Matthew 5, verse 5, you remember this, one of the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit what? Home in the New Jerusalem? And God said, okay, David, here's the whole new earth out there. Beautiful beyond description. You go out there and find yourself a homestead. Find yourself a country estate. And you build whatever you want to build out there. And one thing I'm going to have is a garden. Maybe a waterfall in my living room. Joy, anticipation, worth the cross? Yes. But brothers and sisters, like it was with Jesus, before the joy comes the cross. Jesus said this in Matthew 16, verses 24 to 26. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself. That's an ugly word. Deny himself. And take up his cross and follow me. Before the joy comes the cross. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Listen to this. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? What will a man give in exchange for his soul? Now, let's think a moment about what kind of cross does Jesus want me to carry? What kind of self-denial is he expecting from me or from you? I'm going to maybe surprise you now, but I think that the cross that's the most essential for us to carry is the one described in Romans 12, verse 2. This is the cross that we have to carry. It's the pain we have to endure if we expect ever to enjoy heaven. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. That's my cross. That's your cross. Do not be conformed to this world. You can't live like this world lives. You've got to come out of this world and be transformed in your mind so that your heart is set on the joy set before you. That's hard. I was attending a Sabbath Services class. My wife and I were on a trip someplace, and I don't even know where it was now, but we went in a Sabbath Services class, and the lady was teaching. She was a good teacher, teaching the class and talking about not loving the world. And I spoke up, probably should stay quiet, but I spoke up and said, well, you know, I am not so challenged by not loving the world. My challenge is I love me too much. My challenge is loving me more than I love Jesus. Well, Jesus did talk about not loving the world. 1 John 2, verses 15 to 17. Do not love the world or the things in the world. anyone loves the world, love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it, but he who does the will of God abides forever. For the joy set before you. Look at that, and then look at the cross, the self-denial, the transformation. That's painful. It hurts. You know, it's always painful to deny yourself. Now, I know that some people suffer more than others. I've had the experience through the last 60 years, 68 years, of seeing one member of the family, husband or the wife, I've seen it both ways, decide to choose Jesus and the joy set before them. And it cost them their family. It cost them their marriage. And I've known a lot of people who've lost their jobs because of their decision to keep the Sabbath and refuse to work on Sabbath. Some people do suffer more than others. But all of us have to suffer some of self-denial, of dying to self, of choosing not to be a part of this world. And so my challenge in my mind and for you this morning is, which is the biggest? In your mind, which is the biggest? The joy set before you, or the cross that stands between you and that joy? It's sad for a pastor when some of his church members decide the cross is too big. That hurts. And it hurts Jesus too. But we have church members who are making the wrong decisions, in my opinion. They are saying by their actions that the cross, self-denial, is bigger than the joy set before them. I don't know what challenges you may be facing. I don't know what pain you may be enduring. And neither do I know what you are avoiding, what you're excusing, what you're justifying. I'm going to say something now that I might not maybe I shouldn't say. But in my experience, over 68 years of ministry, the first sign to me that I've noticed over the years, the first sign that a person says the cross is too big is when they stop coming to Sabbath school. To me, that's almost always a sign that eventually they're going to stop walking with Jesus. Sorry. That's my experience of 68 years of ministry. My plea to you, the joy that Jesus has planned for you is worth the sacrifice, the suffering, the pain that you endure in this life. It'll be worth it, brothers and sisters. I appeal to you, choose the joy set before you.